Daniel didn't move. The world around him faded into a distant blur, the wind, the sound of waves crashing nearby, even the cold drops soaking through his shirt. All he could see was Mira, standing under the porch light, looking more fragile than he remembered and yet more real than she had ever been in his dreams. She stood still, not making a move to come closer. Her hands were shaking slightly. Her lips trembled as though she wanted to say something else, but no words followed. Daniel finally stepped forward and gently took her hand. It was cold, trembling in his. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "I thought you were gone forever." Mira looked down. "I was gone. But not the way you think." He wanted to ask everything. Where she had been, why she had left, why she never called, never wrote, never told him she was alive. But the words got caught in his throat. There was too much emotion, too much shock. He stepped aside, holding the door open for her. She hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The house hadn't changed. Still smelled faintly of old books and the sea breeze. Mira looked around slowly, eyes drifting over the photos on the walls, the table where they used to have dinner, the old rug where they once danced barefoot on a quiet Sunday morning. Everything was still there. Daniel had never changed any of it. He brought her a towel and one of his hoodies. She changed in silence, then sat at the kitchen table, wrapping her hands around the still warm coffee cup that he had poured without knowing she'd return. "I used to imagine this moment," he said quietly, sitting across from her. 100 ways. 1,000. Sometimes I was angry. Sometimes I was broken. But I never stopped hoping. She looked at him then, her eyes full of pain and love and something deeper, something darker. "I wanted to come back so many times," she said. "But I couldn't. It wasn't safe." Daniel leaned forward. "Safe from what?" She didn't answer. Not right away. Her fingers traced the rim of the cup as if the right words might be found there. "There were things I didn't tell you," she said. "About my past. About my family. People they were involved with. I thought I had escaped all of it, but I hadn't. Came back the week before our anniversary. I got a message. A threat." Daniel's face tightened. "You should have told me." "I was scared," she said, her voice cracking. "They said they'd hurt you. That if I didn't disappear, you'd pay the price. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I left everything, my phone, my life. I thought I could protect you by vanishing." He sat back, stunned. "You thought disappearing was the only way?" Tears filled her eyes. "I know it sounds foolish now, but they were serious. I couldn't risk your life. I thought they'd leave you alone if I was gone." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. The years of wondering, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, it all started to twist and knot inside him. But now she was here, and that changed everything. "Where did you go?" he asked. "Different places. I stayed off the grid. Changed my name. I was always moving. Every time I felt safe enough to come back, something would happen and I'd run again. But lately, things went quiet. I started to believe maybe they were finally gone." Daniel stared at her for a long moment. "You could have sent a message. Anything." "I know," she said softly. "But I didn't know if you hated me. I didn't know if you moved on." Daniel gave a sad smile. "I made coffee for you every morning. I left the porch light on every night. I kept your books exactly where you left them. What do you think?" She choked out a quiet laugh through her tears. "You always were the best man I've ever known." Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with everything unsaid, every moment they had lost, every memory still lingering between them. "I don't know what happens next," she said finally. "I don't know if I'll be safe here. I just knew that if I had one place in this world where I still belonged, it was this house. With you." Daniel stood up, walked around the table, and gently took her in his arms. She melted into him like she had never been gone. He could feel her heart beating fast against his chest. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she was home. That was enough. They sat together on the old couch after that, watching the rain hit the windows. Daniel lit a fire. Mira pulled a blanket around her shoulders and leaned against him. Felt strange and perfect all at once. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. When the clock struck midnight, Daniel looked down at her. Her eyes were closed, but she wasn't asleep. "I missed you every single day," he said. She didn't open her eyes, but she smiled. "I missed you every heartbeat." He didn't ask her for promises. He didn't need explanations. She was here in the same space, breathing the same air, and for now that was more than enough. Outside, the storm calmed. The sea whispered to the shore as if telling it a secret. The lighthouse blinked slowly in the distance. In a small house near the edge of the world, two souls who had never stopped loving found each other again, wrapped not just in blankets but in the fragile warmth of a second chance. Daniel opened the door to his bookstore every morning at 8. The sign above the old wooden door read, "Sea and Ink," painted by Mira years ago with a little seagull in the corner because she said it looked like hope. He never changed it. The bell above the door jingled softly and he stepped inside. The shelves were full and neatly arranged, just the way he liked them. It smelled like paper, sea salt, and old dreams. A small heater hummed near the corner where the air always stayed cold no matter the season. And by the window, still untouched, was Myra's chair, a deep blue armchair she had picked out on a rainy afternoon when the store first opened. She used to sit there reading poetry aloud or doodling in her notebook. He hadn't moved it in 7 years. Not even once. Life moved slowly in the small coastal town. Seasons came and went. Tourists passed through during the summers, asking for books about shipwrecks or local legends. Children visited after school to flip through picture books and leave fingerprints on the windows. Sometimes people asked about the woman in the photo near the register. Daniel always said the same thing. She used to love this place. He never told them more. After Mira disappeared, the town had wrapped itself in quiet sympathy. Friends had brought casseroles. The local paper had printed her picture more than once. For a time, Daniel was never alone. But weeks turned to months, and months turned into years. Eventually, people stopped asking. They assumed the worst, as people do when silence lingers too long. But Daniel never stopped believing she might return. He tried to move forward. Not to forget. He knew he never could, but to carry the weight of her absence in a way that didn't crush him. He made routines. He walked to the pier every Sunday morning and watched the fishing boats come in. He fed the stray cats behind the bakery. He taught himself how to make tea the way she used to like it, even though he was the only one drinking it now. Every night before closing the store, he sat in her chair, looked out at the ocean, and talked to her. Just a few words. Sometimes a memory. Sometimes a wish. The world changed during those years. New buildings went up. A few old shops closed. His hair turned a little more gray around the edges. But inside, something remained frozen, like a part of his heart had stopped the moment she walked away that night and never restarted. There were moments when he almost laughed again, when he thought maybe he was healing. But then something small, a song, a scent, a stranger with eyes that reminded him of her, would crack him open all over again. And the pain would return, soft and sharp like a ghost brushing past his skin. He had one dream that returned again and again. In it, Mira stood on the shore at sunset, her hair blowing in the wind, her feet bare in the sand. She never said anything. She just looked at him with the same eyes that had once promised forever. And he always woke up before he could reach her. His friends tried to help. Sarah, the town librarian, had asked him once if he wanted to go on a blind date. He'd smiled politely and said no. Another time, Paul from the hardware store offered him a weekend trip to the mountains. Good to get away from the sea, he had said. But Daniel didn't want to leave. He was afraid that if Mira ever came back, even by some miracle, he had to be here. He had to be the one to answer the door. Some nights he thought maybe she was dead. Maybe she had been taken, hurt, lost in some tragedy he would never understand. The not knowing was the cruelest part. It left space for hope, and hope was the heaviest thing to carry. On the 7th anniversary of her disappearance, the town was quiet. Rain fell softly, and the streets glistened with puddles. Daniel closed the store early and walked down to the cliffs overlooking the sea. He stood there for a long time, watching the waves move like slow breath. He spoke aloud, knowing no one else could hear. "It's been 7 years, Mira. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if you're alive. But I still see you in every sunrise. I still wait. And I'll keep waiting even if it makes me a fool." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket and placed it beneath a rock near the edge. A letter he had written but never sent. The wind caught his coat as he turned and walked away. Back at the store, the bell jingled as he stepped inside. He locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat in her chair. Tea beside him had gone cold, but he didn't mind. He closed his eyes and listened to the storm begin outside. And then something strange happened. A sound. Not the wind. Not the creak of the old wood. A knock. He froze. One soft knock. Then another. He opened his eyes slowly. His heart began to pound. He stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. But no one was there. He stepped out into the rain, looked both ways. Empty street. Shadows. Nothing. Then he looked down. There, sitting on the doorstep, was a small envelope. No name. No return address. Just a plain white envelope, soaked slightly from the rain. His hands shook as he picked it up and went back inside. He locked the door behind him, sat at the counter, and opened it. Inside was a note. Just one line. "I'm safe. Please wait a little longer." There was no signature. No other clue. But the handwriting, he knew it. His heart knew it before his mind did. It was Mira's. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the note. His hands gripped the edges as if it might vanish if he blinked. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't over. She was alive. He read the words over and over until the letters blurred. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time in 7 years, hope didn't feel like a burden. Felt like breath returning to a body that had nearly forgotten how to inhale. She was out there. Somewhere. And she was coming back. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't need to. Candle in the window burned until morning, casting a soft glow over Mira's chair. The ocean whispered against the shore. And Daniel sat quietly, eyes on the door, heart beating with something it hadn't felt in years. Promise. Rain fell hard against the windows. The sound of it filled the quiet house like a soft drumbeat. Daniel sat alone in the living room, a book resting forgotten in his lap. The light from the fireplace flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Side, the world was gray and wet, the sky heavy with storm clouds. It was an ordinary evening in every way. Ordinary until the knock. First, Daniel thought he had imagined it. Just the wind, maybe. But then it came again, 3 soft, deliberate knocks at the front door. He froze. No one ever came to visit at this hour, especially not on a night like this. His heart started to pound. He stood slowly, his legs stiff from sitting too long. The knock didn't come again. It was quiet now except for the rain and the crackling fire. He walked to the door, hesitated, and placed his hand on the handle. He opened it. There she was. Soaked from the rain, her coat clinging to her thin frame, hair plastered to her cheeks. Her eyes met his, and everything else vanished. She looked older. Paler. There were shadows under her eyes. A scar on her jaw he didn't remember. But it was her. Mira. For a moment they just stared at each other. Neither of them spoke. The rain poured down behind her, the wind pushing against her back like the world was trying to pull her away again. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly, her voice nearly drowned by the storm. Daniel couldn't speak. He couldn't move. His hands were shaking. His breath caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times over the past 7 years. But now that it was real, it didn't feel like a dream. Felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the world tipping underneath him. "Come in," he finally managed. She stepped inside, and he closed the door behind her. She stood there dripping water onto the wooden floor, her arms wrapped around herself. He went to the coat rack, took down a towel, and handed it to her. Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and he felt a jolt like lightning under his skin. She dried her face and hair slowly. He noticed how her hands trembled. She didn't look at him again right away. Instead, she turned slightly toward the fireplace and stood there for a moment, soaking in the warmth. Daniel couldn't stop staring. "Mira," he whispered. "I'm sorry," she said, not turning around. "For disappearing. For everything." He didn't know what to say. Every word in his mind seemed too small, too heavy, too broken. He walked to the couch and sat down slowly, still trying to understand if this was real. She finally turned to face him again. Her eyes were the same. Deep, dark, filled with something he could never name but always felt. Love. Pain. 1,000 stories buried behind silence. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice low. She sat down across from him but didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, twisting the towel in her lap. Her shoulders were hunched, like she was carrying the weight of every year between them. "It's a long story," she said. "And I don't know if I can tell it all." "Not yet." He nodded slowly. "You're here. That's what matters." She looked up then, and tears filled her eyes. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. "Not once." Her lips trembled. "I thought about you too. Every day. You kept me alive. Why didn't you come back?" "I wanted to, but I couldn't. It wasn't safe." That word, safe, hung in the air between them. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in plastic. A photograph. It was worn and creased from being carried too long. She handed it to him. It was a picture of them, taken on the beach years ago. He remembered that day. Her laughter. The way she had stolen his hat and refused to give it back. He felt the sting of memory like salt in a wound. "I kept this with me," she said. "Even when I had nothing else." "Where were you, Mira?" he asked again, more gently this time. She took a deep breath. "After I left that night, something happened. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could protect you by staying away. But I got trapped in something I couldn't escape. People were watching me, controlling where I went, who I could talk to. It took me years to find a way out." He stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. "I was scared they would hurt you," she continued. "So I stayed silent. But I never stopped loving you." The room felt too small for everything between them. Daniel stood up, walked to the fireplace, and stared into the flames. "I thought you were dead." "I know. Everyone thought you were dead." "I know," she whispered. "I grieved you. And I waited. I talked to your picture every night. I left a candle in the window. I wrote you letters I never sent." Tears slid down his cheeks now, hot and bitter. "I know," she said again, her voice breaking. "I saw the candle once. From far away. I couldn't come closer. But I knew it was for me." He turned around and looked at her. "Do you still love me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and walked slowly to him. When she reached him, she reached out, touched his face with cold fingers, and nodded. "I never stopped," she said. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closed, his heart breaking all over again, but in a new way now, breaking open. They stood like that for a long moment. Then he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She felt so small, so fragile in his embrace, but real. Alive. They didn't speak. They just held each other, the fire crackling beside them, the rain continuing to fall outside. Later, he made her tea. She sat in the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket, while he moved around the room like a man in a dream. "Do you want to stay here?" he asked, placing the cup in front of her. She looked up at him with tired eyes. "I don't know how long I'll be safe. But yes, I want to stay." He sat down beside her. "Then stay." They drank in silence. Her hands were warmer now, her eyes less haunted. He wanted to ask 100 questions about where she'd been, who had taken her, what she had suffered. But he didn't. Not yet. She was here. That was enough for tonight. When the fire burned low, he brought her to the guest room and gave her a fresh shirt to wear. She smiled faintly when she saw it. "This used to be mine," she said. He nodded. "I never threw anything away." She touched his hand. "Thank you. Good night, Mira." "Good night, Daniel." He stood at the doorway for a long time after she had closed her eyes, watching her breathe, listening to the soft rhythm of life returning to a space that had known only absence for too long. He went back to the living room, lit another candle, and placed it in the window. This time not as a hope, but as a welcome. She was home. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving behind a world that smelled of wet earth and second chances. Daniel stood by the window, watching the clouds drift across a pale sky. He hadn't slept all night. The image of Mira standing at his door replayed in his mind like a scene from a dream that refused to end. But it wasn't a dream. She was here. Stairs. In the guest room that hadn't been used in years. He heard soft footsteps above him and then silence. Kind of silence that stretches between people who have too much to say but don't know how to begin. He brewed coffee, setting 2 cups on the small kitchen table. When she finally came down, Mira looked like she had barely slept either. Her hair was damp and tangled, her face pale, but her eyes, those deep, unreadable eyes, still held the same quiet fire he remembered. She sat across from him without a word. He pushed a cup toward her. She wrapped her hands around it, more for comfort than warmth. Minutes passed. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock and the soft clink of the spoon as she stirred her coffee without drinking it. "You're really here," Daniel finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mira nodded. "I waited," he added, his fingers tightening around his own cup. "I waited for years." Hoping, wondering. "I know," she said quietly, still not meeting his eyes. "I saw your name. In articles. The bookstore. You never left." "I couldn't," he said. "I didn't want to leave the last place I saw you." Silence again. It was heavier this time. She seemed to fold in on herself, as if she were hiding something too large for words. "I'm sorry," she said, finally looking up. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but thank you for letting me in last night." "I never stopped loving you," he said without thinking. "Even when you were gone." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked away the tears. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street like she was watching for something, or someone. "Where were you, Mira?" he asked. "What happened?" She didn't turn. "I can't tell you." "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because it will only hurt you," she whispered. "And I've already done enough of that." He wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in her voice stopped him. It wasn't fear. It was sorrow. Deep, aching sorrow. Later that afternoon, he returned to the shop. Mira followed him without a word. The bell above the door jingled just like it used to when she would visit during lunch breaks or rainy afternoons. Place hadn't changed much, still filled with shelves of stories and dust motes dancing in golden light. "I didn't touch your chair," Daniel said softly, pointing to the worn red armchair by the window. Mira smiled faintly. You kept it? I couldn't bring myself to move it. Felt like if I did, I'd lose you for real. She sat down slowly, running her fingers over the armrest. Her hand trembled. Daniel busied himself behind the counter, pretending to check invoices, but really, he was watching her reflection in the glass. She didn't speak for a long time, but her presence filled the room with an electricity he hadn't felt in years. When the shop grew quiet and evening shadows began to creep across the floor, she rose and helped him stack books and close the blinds. Their hands brushed once, and she didn't pull away. After the last light was turned off and the door locked behind them, they stood outside under the street lamp. It buzzed softly above them, casting a gentle glow. Why did you come back? He asked, the question finally rising to his lips. Because there was nowhere else, she said. Because I couldn't forget you, no matter how far I ran. You didn't have to run, he said. Whatever it is, we could have faced it together. She looked up at him then, eyes filled with something deeper than fear, longing, regret, love. I was trying to protect you, she said. Even now. I'm still trying. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, slow and gentle. Then stay, he said. Let me protect you now. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in 7 years, the silence between them felt less like distance and more like healing. They walked home slowly, not needing to speak. The sound of their steps on the sidewalk, the rhythm of their joined hands, these were enough. That night, she didn't return to the guest room. She stood in the doorway of his bedroom, watching him as he folded blankets and adjusted the pillows. Do you still dream about me? She asked suddenly. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Every night. I never stopped dreaming about you, she said. Even when I tried to forget. He took a step forward, heart pounding. Don't forget. Remember. Say. Let's start again, Mira. She didn't smile, but there was something soft in her eyes. She walked into the room, closed the door behind her, and stood silently as if waiting for permission to breathe again. In the quiet of that room, in the low light of the lamp, they sat beside each other. The silence was different now. It wasn't the kind that came from distance or secrets. It was the kind that grows in places where love is trying to return. Where two people are learning to speak again, not just with words but with gestures, looks, the spaces between touches. Mira rested her head against his chest. Daniel held her gently, afraid she might vanish again if he held on too tight. I'm scared, she said after a long pause. So am I, he whispered. But I want to stay. If you still want me. I never stopped wanting you, he said. She nodded, her breath catching in her throat. Then maybe this time we don't have to run. No, he said. This time we stand still. Together. Sighed, the ocean whispered against the shore. Inside, two hearts, once broken by years and silence, began to find their rhythm again. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and soft, painting golden patterns on the wooden floor. Mira stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, her eyes distant. Daniel watched her from the hallway, quietly, not wanting to break the calm that had settled between them since last night. There was something about her stillness today that felt different, less like fear and more like preparation. He walked in slowly, his footsteps soft. She looked up, gave a small smile, and nodded toward the table. They sat across from each other, the same way they had the day before, but the air between them felt heavier now. Daniel could feel the tension in her shoulders, in the way her fingers tapped lightly on the edge of the cup. I need to tell you something, she said after a long pause. He didn't speak. He just nodded and waited. Mira took a deep breath. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I never stopped. Not for a second. I know, he said quietly. I felt it. Even when you were gone. She gave a sad smile. I left because I had to. Because if I had stayed, you might not be alive right now. Daniel frowned, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? It's about my family, she began, her voice low and steady. There were things I never told you, things I never wanted to tell anyone. But I think you deserve the truth now. He leaned in, listening closely, watching her eyes as they flickered with the weight of memory. My father, she said slowly, was involved in something dangerous. He worked for a group that did things I didn't understand fully at the time. They were powerful, and they didn't like outsiders asking questions. When he died, I thought it was an accident. But it wasn't. Daniel stayed quiet, letting her continue. I started digging, she said. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to find out who had really hurt him. And I did. But I also found out that they were watching me. Watching everyone close to me. That's when I realized if I stayed, they would come for you too. So I disappeared. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. All this time, you were running from them? Yes, she said. They threatened me. Told me that if I didn't stop, you'd be next. I couldn't bear that. So I ran. Cut off everything. I erased my tracks. I went into hiding. And I stayed away because I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. Daniel's hands tightened around his cup. You went through all that alone? She nodded. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every day I wanted to come back. To see your face. To hear your voice. But I was too afraid. I thought they would find you. What changed? He asked gently. 2 months ago, she said, I found out that the group had collapsed. Their leader was arrested. The rest scattered. It was over. For the first time in years, I felt safe. And the first thing I thought about was coming home to you. Daniel stood slowly, walked around the table, and sat beside her. He took her hand in his, holding it firmly but gently. You didn't have to carry all that alone, he said. You could have told me. I wanted to, she whispered. So many times. But I couldn't risk it. You mean everything to me. And the thought of something happening to you because of my past, it would have destroyed me. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. We've lost 7 years, Mira. But we're here now. Together. And I'm not going to let anything take you away again. Her eyes filled with tears. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, letting the tears fall freely. He held her tightly, pressing his lips to her forehead. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence, letting the truth settle between them like a storm that had finally passed. Later that day, they walked along the beach. The sea was calm, the sky wide and blue above them. Mira kicked off her shoes and let the waves kiss her feet. Daniel walked beside her, their fingers entwined. I miss this, she said softly. The ocean. The smell of salt. The sound of the wind. And you. I kept walking here, he said. Every week. Hoping you might be waiting at the edge of the sand. She looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. I was always with you. Even when I wasn't. He stopped and turned to her. We still have time, Mira. Maybe not all the answers, but time. And I want to spend it with you. She smiled, a real smile this time. Kind he hadn't seen in years. So do I. That night, they cooked dinner together. Simple things, roasted vegetables, warm bread, wine. Felt like old times. Music played softly in the background, and laughter came easier now. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching stars appear one by one. I used to stare at the stars and wonder if you were doing the same thing, Daniel said. I was, she whispered. Every night. He took her hand again. Let's not lose each other again. We won't, she said. I promise. She leaned her head against his, and they stayed like that, silent and still, two people finally finding peace after years of running. The truth had come out. Pain had been shared. And now love, steady, warm, and real, was all that remained. Daniel stood in the kitchen, the kettle humming quietly behind him, but his eyes were on Mira. She sat at the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, looking down at her feet. The air between them felt heavy, like something waiting to break. Neither of them had spoken since dinner. They ate in silence, a kind of silence filled not with emptiness, but with something unspoken. Daniel couldn't read her anymore, not the way he used to. Once he could tell what she felt just by how she stirred her tea or the way her hand brushed against his. Now it felt like there was a wall, invisible but cold and real. He turned off the kettle and poured the water into 2 mugs, letting the steam rise between them. Then he walked over and placed 1 mug in front of her. She gave a small nod in thanks but didn't look up. He sat beside her, careful not to sit too close, unsure of the space she needed. The warmth of the tea filled the room, but the cold remained. "You don't have to stay," he finally said, his voice low, careful. She looked at him then, and for a second he thought he saw fear in her eyes. Or maybe sorrow. Maybe both. "I know," she whispered. "But I want to." Daniel turned away. It was easier to look at the fire flickering in the old stove than to hold her gaze. His heart was beating too loud, and he hated how much he wanted to believe her. 7 years. 7 years of wondering, grieving, holding on to a ghost. And now she was here. Real. And yet not the same. "Why now?" he asked. "Why come back now when everything's different? When I had finally, almost, started to live again?" Mira didn't answer right away. She took a slow breath and wrapped her fingers tighter around her mug. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "Because I couldn't stay away anymore. Because every morning I woke up missing you. Because every night I went to sleep wondering if you still remembered me." Daniel laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "Of course I remembered you. That was the problem." Silence fell again, kind that pressed on the chest. Mira placed her tea on the table and turned to face him fully. "I know I broke you," she said. "I know I left you without answers. I know it was cruel. But I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. Not just for myself. For you." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You could have told me. We could have faced it together." She looked down, eyes shining with the beginning of tears. "If I had told you, you would have followed me. You would have fought for me. And you would have been dragged into something dark. I couldn't let that happen." He looked at her for a long time. The curve of her cheek, the tremble in her lower lip, the way she clutched her hands together like she was afraid they'd fall apart. This was the woman he had loved. The woman he still loved. But love wasn't simple anymore. "I don't know how to let you back in," he said, voice raw. Myra's lips parted slightly. Her eyes filled with something like hope and maybe fear too. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said. "I'll leave if you want me to. But I needed to tell you I'm here now. I'm done running." Daniel stood and walked to the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. He watched it slide down in slow streaks. His heart ached, confused by the war between longing and fear. He had imagined this moment 100 times, no, 1,000. But none of those imagined reunions felt like this. None had this weight. This cost. "You say you're done running," he said without turning. "But what if the past finds you again? What if it finds us?" "I'll fight," she said. "I'm not afraid anymore." He turned then, and she was standing too, her face pale but fierce. For a moment, the girl he once knew shone through the woman in front of him. The Mira who danced barefoot in the kitchen. The Mira who wrote poems in the margins of his books. The Mira who kissed him like the world was ending. She was still there. Somewhere. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her. Their faces inches apart. He looked into her eyes, those familiar eyes that once held his whole future. "I don't know if I can go through losing you again," he said. She reached up, her fingers trembling as they touched his cheek. Then don't lose me, she whispered. Keep me. Daniel closed his eyes. The feel of her touch brought back memories so sharp they hurt. But he didn't pull away. He leaned into her palm, and in that moment he wanted to believe. He wanted to forget the pain, forget the years, forget everything but this. The warmth of her hand, the sound of her voice, the look in her eyes. He opened his eyes again. Say it, he said. She blinked. Say what? Say you love me. Say you still do. I never stopped, she said without hesitation. Daniel leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion or heat. It was slow, uncertain, filled with the weight of time and the depth of love that had survived it. Her hands moved to his shoulders, holding him like he might disappear. When they pulled apart, her eyes were shining. They stood like that for a while, the only sound the ticking of the clock and the soft whisper of rain. Later, they sat together on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, his arm around her shoulders. She rested her head on his chest, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. Not because all was resolved, but because she was here, and he had chosen not to push her away. What now? She asked softly. We take it slow, he said. We rebuild. If you're really here to stay, then we'll find our way again. I am, she said. I promise. Daniel looked down at her, at the way her eyelashes curled against her cheek, at the soft rise and fall of her breathing. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. But in that moment, it didn't matter. He had made his choice. And for the first time in 7 years, it felt like the beginning of something real. Something worth risking. Something like hope. Daniel held Mira's hand tightly as they stood by the old wooden door of his little bookstore. The night air was cool, filled with the soft sounds of the town settling down for sleep. The quiet was peaceful, but Daniel's heart was beating like a drum in his chest. For 7 years, he had waited for this moment. 7 years of pain, hope, and endless dreams of her coming back. I've waited 7 years for this door to open again, Daniel said softly, his voice full of emotion. He looked into Mira's eyes, searching for the same hope he felt inside. Mira smiled, a gentle, tired smile that held all the love and regret she had kept hidden for so long. I'm here now, she whispered. And I'm not leaving. Without a second thought, Daniel pulled her close. Their lips met in a kiss that was slow and deep, full of the years they lost and the love that never died. This kiss wasn't rushed or hesitant like before. It was full of promise. A promise to never let go. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms. The world outside seemed to fade away until it was just the two of them, together again after so much time apart. As the first light of dawn started to color the sky with soft pinks and oranges, Daniel took Mira's hand again. Come with me, he said, his voice gentle but certain. They walked slowly out of the bookstore and down the narrow streets of the town. The world was waking up around them, the distant sound of waves, the soft calls of early birds, the smell of salt in the air. The town was still quiet, but to Daniel and Mira, it felt like the start of everything new. They reached the beach where they had first met, the place where their love story had begun so many years ago. The sand was cool under their feet, and the ocean stretched wide and endless before them. Mira looked out at the water, then back at Daniel. It feels like we never really left, she said, her voice soft but full of wonder. Daniel nodded. Because we never did. No matter the distance, the time, or the silence, we were always connected. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky with warm colors that made the ocean sparkle. Daniel pulled Mira closer, wrapping his arms around her. They stood there for a long time, watching the light grow stronger, feeling the fresh air and the endless possibility of a new day. I want to start again, Daniel said. Not just today, but forever. Mira smiled through tears, her eyes shining with hope and love. Forever, she agreed. They walked hand in hand along the shoreline, the waves gently lapping at their feet. Each step felt like a promise, a choice to face whatever came next together. No more running, no more hiding. Just love, trust, and the courage to build a new future side by side. As the sun rose higher, warming the world around them, Daniel and Mira knew this was their second chance. A chance to heal the past and create a life full of love and happiness. They stopped for a moment, looking out at the endless ocean and the bright horizon. Daniel kissed Mira's forehead and whispered, "This is only the beginning." And with that, they walked forward together towards whatever the future held. Their hearts open, their love stronger than ever, ready to face the world side by side. No matter what happened next, they had each other. That was all that mattered. And this time, they would never let go.